the good old summertime, in the good old summertime.
Hello and welcome to part 2 of our chat on the bowling wizardry of Sydney Barnes, as I'm joined by his biographer, Andy Searle. My name is Tom Ford. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast so you'll never miss an episode. What was his life like outside of the sporting field? He was a professional cricketer, but did he also have skills or craft that he could rely on? And if so, how did that fit in with his cricketing schedule?
Well, not originally. Up until the First World War, he worked as a clerk in a Staffordshire colliery. So it was a white collar job, but not a very high up job. But this obviously supplemented his income. After the First World War, when he was a famous cricketer and getting paid lots of money, he could pick and choose. And he moved to South Wales for a while, to North Wales for a while, now to Colwyn Bay. He ran a pub. He moved to Derbyshire, not too far away from where he played his professional cricket at Porthill Park in Staffordshire, where easy to get to Manchester and all these cotton towns he played for. He ran a cafe bar in Alliston in Derbyshire for a while. At the same time, he trained to be a calligrapher. And sometime in the 1920s, he got a job at Staffordshire County Council, which he kept till his dying days, till the 1960s, till he was in his early 90s, writing illuminated addresses in beautiful copperplate handwriting. People used to say when they got a letter from him how beautiful it looked. And some of his designs and his illuminated addresses are still hanging in Stafford Town Hall. So he became a craftsman as well, and that was well paid as well. So he had his cricket and he had this career. So he had a very good life. He also, of course, his wife had a son with George Taylor. Alice had a son with George Taylor. Barnes adopted this son, and the grandchildren that exist today are the sons of John, the son of Alice and George Taylor. And he basically adopted the son, and the son basically became his son.
And isn't there a story regarding his calligraphy that didn't he present something to the Queen, the young Queen?
He did in 1957, I think it is. He did an illuminated address of Elizabeth I's visit to Stafford, and he presented this to the Queen, and the Queen sent a personal letter to him thanking him for doing it. So, which he obviously was very made up for. But and by all accounts, and from what I've seen from drawings and books, his calligraphy skills were exceptional.
Do you think there's any link between his ability to produce calligraphy, which obviously takes a very steady hand, and his ability to bowl or to be able to use his fingers to get what he wanted from the ball, or is that too much of a...
Neville Carter said he held and manipulated the ball like a violinist does with a fiddle, So I suppose there is some sort of connection. You never know. He had long fingers. He was able to concentrate for long periods of time. So all these probably helped. There probably wasn't that much of a crossover because calligraphy is probably something you can learn to do. But yeah, I suppose that he had some of the assets that would make that connection.
And of course, very typical of Neville Cardus to make a musical metaphor, of course, when it comes to cricket. Andy, a constant theme with Barnes's Test career was his selection and subsequent non-selection in the national team. If we skip to the 1909 Test series, the Ashes against Australia in England, as an example, he was left out, which ultimately played a huge part in Australia winning that series under Monty Noble. And Archie McLaren was the captain for this series, which is also or doubly odd. So, can you explain why Barnes, who was taking so many wickets at this point outside of Test, why he was omitted?
Well, it was Lord Hawke again.
Mm,
By this time, the captain had no say in picking the team. It was a selection committee. And Lord Hawke was the chairman of that selectors. There was also Leveson Gower. I think there were four selectors. I think C.B. Fry was one, but
mm.
C.B. Fry said became a lone voice. Everyone knew Barnes should play the whole Test series, but he was outvoted. Leveson Gower was a right hand man of Lord Hawke, and I can't remember who the fourth one was, but they basically gang together until with England down in the series, they needed Barnes back for the third Test match.
Well, an Ashes series which he wasn't omitted from was the 1911-12 tour of Australia. Not only did he play in all 5 Test matches, but he took a record 34 Australian wickets on tour, and he formed a formidable bowling partnership with Frank Foster, who took 32 wickets himself. And England won the series, of course. Barnes is 38 at this point in time, which is remarkable to think that he's, taking this record-breaking bowling feat at that point in his life in these hot conditions of Australia. Do you think this was the series that finally England and the selectors and everyone, the cricketing establishment, finally recognised his greatness?
Yes, I think it definitely was. He was already considered a great bowler by then, but this cemented it. Winning in Australia, winning comprehensively, and being part of a two-pronged attack with Frank Foster, well, three-pronged attack with Frank Foster and the captain Johnny Douglas. I think only twice have England won 4-1 in Australia since. So
Mm,
it was a remarkable occurrence. Australia are notoriously strong on their own patch, and I'm sure the records show that they've uh, won the vast majority of series and by large amounts. But it was an England team that uh, wasn't expected to do well.
mm,
There were only a few of the players who'd been to Australia before, Barnes being one of them. Frank Foster had been, but he came in on the back of a wonderful season for Warwickshire, where he'd done the double of 1,000 runs and 100 wickets, and Australia suited him. Johnny Douglas became captain by default when the Plum Warner, the original captain, became ill on the tour. So Johnny Douglas and him being a bowler sort of gave him a bit um, knowledge of what bowlers needed, and he was also an excellent sportsman who'd won a gold medal at the Olympics in 1908. So he understood sportsmen and the way they ticked. So he allowed Foster and Barnes to take control of things like field placing, for example,
mm,
and of course the batting spurred on by Jack Hobbs, who was now getting into his greatest form, and he's arguably the greatest opening batsman of all time, and Wilfred Rhodes
mm,
opening the batting, moving from number 11 to number 2 over a period of years. He also contributed a massive amount of runs to the cause. So it was a tremendous performance, and at the end of that series, yes, Barnes was considered the greatest bowler in the world by Australians as well as English
mm.
people, and obviously he was to further cement that in the few years later in the coming years.
Well, and also when we touch on the Australian team at that point in time, 1911-12, I mean, the batting lineup as well. I mean, it's headed by the captain, Clem Hill, and you've got Victor Trumper, Warren Bardsley, Warwick Armstrong. I mean, it's a good batting lineup. I mean, these are some of the most notable names in all of Australian cricket history. So for him to produce that against that lineup is all the more impressive. I mean, there were you could argue that the Australians were slightly distracted from what was happening in the boardroom at the time, certainly Clem Hill, which is another story we don't need to stress at this point in time. But Yes, and as you say, he returns to England and then goes on to even further greatness with his bowling. So they return from the 1911-12 tour, and then there's this very unique series, the Triangular Series, which was to involve England, Australia, and South Africa playing in England. It's often described as ill-fated because there was a lot of, I think, poor administration, but also the weather made it a very unenjoyable series for everyone, except for Sydney Barnes, who in 6 matches takes another 39 wickets. This is on home soil. And then he follows that up with England's tour of South Africa in 1913-14, which has become quite mythical, I suppose, in what he achieved on that tour. So he plays 4 test matches and takes an astounding 49 test wickets. It's almost a feat that has never been and probably won't ever be matched. The singular match at Johannesburg in December of 1913, for example, produced figures by Barnes of 8 for 56 in the first innings and 9 for 103 in the second, which meant he had 17 for 159 for the match, which is quite astounding. It's to this day the second best bowling figures of all time. He was surpassed by Jim Laker, of course, who took 19 wickets. So my question to you, Andy, is how do we assess these quite mythical bowling figures from Barnes today? Firstly, the Triangular Series, but then this series in South Africa, which was played on matting wickets, I believe. He just took all before him. Was he just at the peak of his powers, or could you argue that there was a bit of weak opposition that he was bowling to?
Well, he was certainly at the peak of his powers, and well, I think any cricket historian will agree his achievements in Australia in 11-12 were the best achievement, even though 49 wickets in 4 Test matches is pretty special. But you've got to get those wickets in the Triangular tournament. He dominated South Africa, and he did very, very well against Australia. In South Africa, he dominated them. Yes, South Africa, the team in the Triangular tournament, was a shadow of the team that had won in England a few years previously, and in South Africa in 13-14, he seemed to revel in the matting wickets they played on. But South Africa still had some great players in the series where he took 49 wickets. Herbie Taylor averaged over 50 with the bat. So, and then there was A.D. Norse, who from a long family of great South African batsmen. So they did still have players that could challenge Barnes, but and England had bowlers that had been taking well over 100 wickets in the county championship. Colin Blythe, other players, but they didn't do as well as Barnes did. So Barnes's achievements are still top rank amongst the best ever in Test cricket in the Triangular tournament and in the series in South Africa. But I would rank his performance in Australia in 11-12 as above those two.
I tend to agree, yeah, and certainly as I mentioned before, when you consider the conditions and the Australian side at that point in time. So after the South African tour, obviously shortly after the First World War commences, and we know what happens to international cricket from there on. When the war ends and cricket begins to commence again after the war, England obviously has been decimated by casualties. And when we see those first Australian sides reach England, led by Warwick Armstrong, we sort of can tell that England has really suffered from what happened in the First World War. Barnes doesn't play any further Test cricket, and he doesn't play any county cricket after the First World War, but he continues to play league cricket and to great effect, despite his age. I mean, he's in his mid-40s at this point. Why did he never return to either county or Test cricket, do you think?
Why did he never get selected? Well, I suppose that his age counted against him. People wanted to move on. Also, his greatest supporters, like Archie McLaren, had long since finished uh, finished their cricket careers. There was a new generation. Obviously, a lot of the older generation had died in the war. There was a sense of moving on from the First World War, and I think he himself would have thought, well, yeah, I'll do a job if selected, but I'm quite happy playing for Saltaire in the Bradford League, playing for Staffordshire during the week, earning lots of money, running my pub in Colwyn Bay, running my cafe bar in Derbyshire. So he had a good playing the odd first class match, because he also played in first class matches against touring sides for Wales in the 1920s. He played against the Indians and the West Indies to astounding success. He took lots of wickets in those first class games. So he was probably happy with the way he played in lots of exhibition games against some of the great players, because it was in before the First World War. The Lancashire League, for example, their professionals were English professionals. After the First World War, professionals from other countries started to arrive. For example, Leary Constantine from the West Indies, as the West Indies were trying to get Test status. So these people he could play against on a regular basis. So he was still playing some very competitive cricket, and playing for Staffordshire. As I said before, he was playing against Lancashire second 11, Yorkshire second 11. He played against Len Hutton. He played against Jack Aiken. He played against all these people when they were young and up and coming. He bowled against these people successfully, um, uh, who were giving him stiff competition. He was quite happy to play that role of an elder statesman. If England had called, I'm sure he would have played. But as you say, he was in his mid 40s, nearly 50, 50 in 1923. I think it's pushing a bit. I think Jimmy Anderson will have retired by the time he's 50.
And I suppose, I mean, Wilfred Rhodes makes a famous comeback, obviously, but to have perhaps two 50-year-olds in the side would be asking a bit much at that time. Just on those young up-and-coming players he managed to play against, he never quite had the opportunity to bowl to Bradman, did he?
No, he didn't. No.
Yeah, that would have been a tantalising prospect, I suppose, for all concerned.
I'm surprised a game wasn't arranged in those when he came to England in 1928 or 1930. I suppose Bradman hadn't quite made his name by then, so he wasn't quite as famous a character as he became throughout the 1930s.
If you're enjoying this podcast, perhaps you'd like to support it by buying me, Tom Ford, a coffee. Every little donation helps with the production costs and also inspire me to keep going. You can support by donating as little as $5. Visit buymeacoffee.com/Golden Age of Cricket. Andy, we're at the point of the podcast where we go through the statistics. Statistics aren't everything, obviously, but in the absence of footage and many photographs, it's one of the best things we have to compare with modern cricketers today. So I'm just going to run through some of these figures. We've touched on some already. He obviously made his Test debut in 1901-02 at the SCG, played his last Test on that South African tour in February of 1914, just before the curtain comes down for the First World War. His first class debut and final first class match stretch obviously a larger period. So his first match is in 1894, plays his final match in 1930, which is a very Wilfred Rhodesian lifespan. When we look at the actual numbers, so He played 27 Test matches. Again, this is a time when Test match opportunities only came around every few years. So 27 isn't. It's low by today's standards. It's not low by those standards. So he bowled 7,873 deliveries in Test cricket. He took 189 wickets at the expense of 3,106 runs. As we've mentioned, those remarkable bowling figures. So best bowling figures in an innings, 9 for 103, and he took 17 for 159, his best bowling figures for a match. His Test average, this is remarkable, was 16.43, which still today, when you look at the best bowling averages of all time, he's right up there. And on 5 occasions, he took 24 5-wicket hauls, and 7 times he took 10 wicket for the match, 10 wickets in a match.
24 5-wicket hauls in 27 tests. That is remarkable.
That's a good return, and that really just boggles the mind why the selectors didn't pick him more. Really, I mean, when you look at those figures, he should be the first name put down on the list. Really, when you're picking a team.
Well, he missed something just over 30 Test matches where he wasn't selected in between that first match in Australia in 1901 till the start of the First World War.
Yeah.
If he'd have played in those matches and performed as he had in all those games, he would have taken well over 300 Test wickets. We wouldn't have been talking about Freddie Truman breaking the record of the number of Test wickets, or even or Lance Gibbs, or even some of the great West Indian bowlers. They would have been behind him. So we wouldn't have been talking in the 70s and 80s, 60s, 70s and 80s about these people breaking those records and having the highest number of Test wickets. He would have held all those records for a good number of years till the expansion of Test cricket in the 1980s. So the mind boggles at what he would have achieved had he been selected all the time.
It's an excellent point. But as we've been discussing, the Test cricket career of Sydney Barnes is just a fraction of what he achieved on the sporting field. So if we move to his first-class career, he played 133 first-class matches. He took 719 wickets at the expense of 12,289 runs. Obviously, his Test match figures are his best individual bowling figures for first-class cricket, 9 for 103. And his average in first-class cricket is almost just as good as Test cricket, 17.09. He took 68 5-wicket hauls, and 18 times he scored or took 10 wickets in a match. But as we've discussed, there's another aspect to this statistical story, and a few which you could perhaps elaborate on, because the records aren't as complete, I suppose. So in league cricket, he took 4,069 wickets at the expense of 27,974 runs. But his average, Andy, was 6.08. So he took a wicket every 6 runs?
6 runs.
Remarkable.
Yeah, that is just incredible. You could. I played lots of league cricket. You could just go out and swing the bat at a really good bowler, and you will average more than 6 runs. That figure is mind-boggling, and his figure for Staffordshire as well. 1,441 wickets in Staffordshire. No minus county cricketer has ever got near 1,000 wickets.
Yeah.
Right? And averaging 8.15 in minor counties cricket.
Yeah.
Where the standard was quite good. Just the level below the county championship. So the figures are just mind-boggling. Over that long period of time, there's no one ever in cricket history has come anywhere near these statistics.
So if we were to surmise or put them together as, I suppose, wickets that he took in his adult life, it's something like 5,000 and it's pushing like 6,000 wickets, which is
It's over 6,000.
yeah, it just shows the hunger of the man to, he obviously loved bowling and he loved taking wickets at all levels.
And he must have been truly fit with that long, rangy action of his, to be bowling like that. He must have been a very, very fit person. Right?
Yeah, and as we've mentioned, when we're watching cricket today or listening on the radio, and they talk about the records that cricketers today are competing against, the name Sydney Barnes often flashes up on screen or it's mentioned on the airwaves because his average was just astounding. And some of those performances in those series, certainly against Australia and South Africa, still stand today. His 49 wickets against South Africa in 1913-14 remains the most in a single test series. And he did it in 4 matches.
I actually sent a copy of my book when it was published in 1997 to Richie Benno, because Australia were in England at that time, and Richie Benno, on one of the commentaries, he said, "This guy Sydney Barnes must have been some sort of bowler. 189 wickets at 16.43." Like.
Yeah.
I was glad that my book sort of brought his name forward a bit more than it had been. It seemed that when I was researching the book, it'd been a name that had been forgotten since he died in the 60s. But his records there are just truly remarkable, and and for the life of me, I can't see any of them ever being beaten. It would just require a colossal. It would require a Sydney Barnes of the 21st century to emerge, who didn't play county cricket, who just played in league cricket and test matches. But under the current system, that's unlikely to happen.
Very unlikely. And the allure of playing other formats like T20 is just so great that you're right. I think these records will stand for all time. So Andy, let's finish talking about Barnes's legacy and what happened afterwards. So what do we know about his life post cricket when he finally put up the flannels, so to speak? Because he played. When was his final match? It was something ridiculous. He was 67.
His final match was in 1940, I think. I think he played for
67
Stone.
years old.
I think he was playing for Stone in Staffordshire. Yeah, in 1940. So it had been the outbreak of it would only been the Second World War that would have stopped him playing on for a few more seasons.
Right.
Yeah. That because all cricket stopped in the Second World War. In the First World War, he managed to get a contract in the Bradford League because obviously there wasn't aircraft around in the First World War. It was a fight going on a long way away in France. But the Second World War was truly a world war. So all cricket stopped in the country because of air raids and things like that. Because all the young men had to be enlisted. So there would have been no cricket playing. But for sure, he would have wanted to play on for a few more years during that Second World War.
Yeah.
So, but almost certainly he was in his 70s at the end of the Second World War. He would have probably have called it the day. He wouldn't have been getting the exercise I expect that he was getting on the cricket field by then. But throughout the late 40s, 50s, and 60s, he became a celebrity. He was sought after by cricketers of the period. Their comments on things. He was a regular attender at test matches, along with his friend and colleague Wilfred Rhodes, who had turned blind. Rhodes used to guide. Barnes used to guide Rhodes round the terracing, round the grounds, when Rhodes became blind. So he was seen often. He would often be asked for his advice. For advice from the Staffordshire team. He'd hold court with anyone who wanted to listen. He was a bit of a reluctant celebrity, but apparently he had a sense of humour. People became very fond of him. He became a famous figure. When he died, his funeral was televised live by the BBC in Birmingham. So he was a celebrity. But as I say, after he died, his sort of his legacy died with him. Really, in a lot of ways, he was forgotten a lot. Along came people the likes of Truman and Lance Gibbs breaking his record, breaking the record for the most Test wickets. So his his legacy sort of died. So I'm very glad that he's 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 become again. A lot of people in the cricket world now, because of all the Facebook sites and all the different cricket websites, they always have like these lists, the best 11 players of
Mm.
all time. Often, Barnes is included in many people's lists, so he has regained some of that legacy, I think.
Yes, I know. I've seen interviews where Jeffrey Boycott is often talking about Sydney Barnes and putting him in his personal best 11, which is remarkable to see. And also Barnes lived to be a grand age, didn't he? 94 or something, and
94.
yeah, and like Wilfred Rhodes, these two men who had long playing careers each lived to be, into their 90s. So many of the golden ages, the cricketers, they died young or middle aged. You get the legend of Trumper when he dies aged 37. But Barnes, probably, testament to his ability to look after his body, and that he ate well and things, probably helped him live to be 94. And
Yeah.
was with Rhodes. They were the two last figures of that age, and when they died, that sort of closed the curtain on the golden age of cricket, so to speak. Um, Apart from his statistical records, are there any monuments, statues that exist today in honor of Sydney Barnes?
Well, I've just in the last couple of weeks I've found out an amazing story about Barnes's ashes. The in the course of doing a club history for a club in Birmingham, I found out from a journalist that that when they redeveloped the Edgbaston ground, they were just about to uh, knock down the bell tower when someone realised that Sydney Barnes's ashes were in there. And just 10 minutes before the bell tower was going to be demolished, they rescued Sydney Barnes's ashes.
Wow.
And now they're sitting in the museum at Edgbaston, but they could have been destroyed forever. Though. So
Why were they in the
um,
Why were they in the bell tower? Do we know?
they'd been after his death. His legacy ended. Don't forget, his connection with Warwickshire was in a way spurious. He only played a few games for them, although he was a Midlands cricketer. He and his connection with his only connection with Lancashire really was those 2 seasons he played. So he didn't really have, and minor counties, Staffordshire, don't really have a home. They play their they minor counties cricket. You play at various different club cricket grounds around the county, so they didn't really have a home base where some monument could be installed for them. But the only real monument was these ashes at Edgbaston. So now they've been rescued, and they were rescued, and they're in a safe place for the until the next redevelopment of
Mm.
Edgbaston. He had a great legacy, but after he died, he was forgotten somewhat. And as I say, when I was researching the book, it was a big surprise to me that no one had done a full length biography of him because of his achievements
Mm. Mm. Are we
and his long life.
are we able to ascertain how? I mean, it's a long time ago now, and a lot has passed. But have any of the establishment sort of paid tribute to him? Like, are there any monuments to him at Lord's or anything, for example, or at Lancashire? Is there anything that, if the average punter was to go there today, would there be recognition of him somewhere?
At Lord's, there is a famous portrait of him hanging at Lord's, along with W.G. Grace, and he's lauded that way. His memory is kept alive that way. At Edgbaston, I say that part of the museum looks at his career. At Lancashire, there was lots of Lancashire was the place where I found lots of my archive material about Barnes, because they also keep archive material about the Lancashire leagues where he played in a lot. So yeah, he has he has some memory, but there's uh, uh, no nothing like a statue or anything like that. But I think that's purely because he never, apart from Staffordshire, were, as- which doesn't have the same sort of um, home feeling as a county cricket club.
Mm,
I'm sure if Staffordshire had been a county cricket club, they and had a home base, like Lancashire have Old Trafford, for example, there would be a statue of Barnes there. But he's more remembered now than he was in the immediate aftermath of his death.
mm,
Um,
mm,
so considering what he did, and not only that, what he stood up for in the early 19th century, fighting for his rights, fighting for the best possible pay. He was playing cricket. He started his Test career just when the 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 Labour Party was starting in England,
mm,
and taking advantage of universal suffrage. More people were getting the vote. He was very much a man of his time and one of the leaders. I think there's a quote in my book that from Bernard Hollywood, who
mm,
played for Staffordshire at the same time as him, said he could have been, he could have been a James Langridge or a James Kerr Hardy. He would, he had that about him, that he was a working class hero who fought for the best possible deal for the working man.
mm.
It's just a pity there weren't more around him of the cricketers that did the same.
Yeah, that's true. As for a statue, I mean, there's still time. I think cricket has actually done quite well to cricket, when you compare it to other sports, to remember the cricketers of the previous century and to retrospectively resurrect them, so to speak. And
Yeah,
I can certainly speak from an Australian point of view that the cricketers of the past, some of them have only recently had statues made, even though they died 70, 80 years ago. So perhaps there's still time. And if anyone is
the,
listening to this podcast who has the powers to create a statue for Sydney Barnes,
the,
I know Andy would support that idea.
yeah, that's the problem. It's where would you put it?
Yeah.
Lords, Edgbaston, Old Trafford, Melbourne
Well, you
would be
could
as
put it
good a
in
place as
Australia, of
any,
course,
considering what he did.
or
What he did
South
in
Africa.
Australia.
Yes.
Sort of that's the only problem. Like,
Yeah.
so it's just the where it would be.
Mm,
Um,
good point. Um, Andy, final question, and as my regular listeners would know, this is how I end each podcast, and that's a hypothetical about how would Sydney Barnes approach modern cricket? Would he be as successful with modern cricket? And by modern cricket, I'm talking about all formats, the shorter forms of the game, and even day-night cricket. But how do you think he would have approached and succeeded in the modern world?
Judging by what I know about him, he would have signed up for the Indian Premier League, the Big Bash,
Yeah,
and thought, I'm not playing county cricket. I'm just going to earn a couple of $1 million here and a couple of $1 million there, and that'll be it, my season.
yeah,
That for sure. I'm sure, I'm sure he would have coped with uncovered pitches.
mm, mm,
With covered pitches, where there wasn't so much help for the bowler. I'm sure he would have, because some of the players he played against, I do a list in the book of who the wickets he got, and they're all the most are all top order batsmen. He very rarely was one of the people who cleaned up tail enders
mm.
and took his wickets. Most of his wickets, he, he got Victor Trumper out
Trumper,
13
yeah,
times.
and I think
Um,
Clem Hill is the next one. So
yeah, yeah.
you're right. He didn't succeed, or his record is not based on sort of those cheap wickets at the end. He really did damage in the opening spell, which is when he was at
Yeah.
his best.
And I think he would have embraced T20 cricket, for example, a short game where he could excel in a short, not use too much energy, a lot of money.
Mhm.
Uh, Certainly, as regards the Indian Premier League, a big, high profile in the cricket world. So uh, I think he would probably embrace that.
Yeah.
Uh, I think he'd have been glad of the money. He
Yes.
wouldn't. He wouldn't have had to open a pub or be a sign writer or work as a colliery clerk.
And
he, he could,
it also suited his approach to cricket because the shorter form meant less standing in a field.
yeah.
He could do his job, go home, and then play another match, go home, etc. And so he possibly would have extended his career even more had he played in.
Yeah, in the Lancashire League, I'm pretty sure at the time it was 32 8-ball overs, so there wouldn't be too much difference in the time and everything. He loved that short form of the game, and obviously thousands watching these grounds. It would have, he turned up when there was a crowd and when there was people watching. He really performed. So I think he would have loved modern cricket. He would have adapted certainly.
Yeah, no, I agree. Well, Andy, thank you so much for being my guest today. It's been fascinating to hear your thoughts on Sydney Barnes. Really interesting chat. And a reminder to my listeners that your book from 97, SF Barnes, His Life and Times, can still be found. I found a copy online, I'm sure at local libraries if you're keen to read it.
We are republishing it next year.
Oh, great.
In hardback and with a limited edition, and with extra chapters of the Sydney Barnes story, which I've found out over the years since I've done it. So look out for that. It's going to be published through Max Books, a specialist cricketing publisher in the UK.
Excellent. That's good news. I will remind my listeners when it's available, and I'll put a link on their podcast website. So, but thank you, Andy, very much. Appreciate your time, and thanks for joining me on the podcast.
No, I've enjoyed it.
Very good.
I'm glad I could hold my breath that long.
No, it was a good chat. Thanks for listening. Be sure to subscribe or favourite the Golden Age of Cricket podcast so you'll never miss an episode. My name is Tom Ford, and until next time, bye for now.